and it is nice to see you here on such a warm, steamy day. Military man, used to uniform. The heat's not bothering you, is it? No.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Yeah. Well, and if you think it's going to, get your head down. Anyway, I just want to say thank you. I know Emily thanked you for coming. I'll just add mine to that. And I also like to say thank you for letting me share this time with you. I do appreciate it. I would like to begin today with Psalm 23. Psalm 23 is that ancient old scripture that has just brought comfort to many people over the years. And I'm going to start there. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters, and he restores my soul. And I just think how many times we need that, just to find a quiet place and just rejuvenate. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Well, we are gathered here today to celebrate the life of Harold Edward Christian, but also to honor his memory. And while it is the death of your father and friend that has brought you here, it's his life that we really want to remember. Because everybody comes to to a service like this for a different reason. But there are a few things that we do have in common. We often have common love, common respect, just the sharing the loss. That's the common part that brings us here. But it is an occasion for sorrow, absolutely. Somebody's gone out of your life. Somebody that's important has gone out of your life. But also, it is an occasion to be thankful for that life that was lived. So that's kind of like I would like to talk about. Thankful for the gift that he gave you as he lived here among you. I'm reminded of the poem, and maybe you've heard it. It's called The Dash by Linda Elliott. I'm going to read through it for you. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend and who referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. And we see those dates, our birth date and our death date. He noted that the first came, the date of his birth, and he spoke of the following day with tears, but he said what mattered most was the dash in between those years. Interestingly enough, everything in our entire life is summed up in that little dash between our birth date and our death date. And that dash represents all the time that we've spent alive on earth, and now only those who love us know how little that line really is. It matters not how much we own, cars, house, cash. What matters is that we live and we love and how we spend that dash. So think about it hard and long. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. I think if anything, that's where we get caught out short. We get so used to life that there's going to be a tomorrow, and someday that tomorrow ends, and we want to have lived our life the best we can. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, to be less quick to anger, to show appreciation more, to love the people in our lives like we've never loved before, if we treat each other with respect, and more often we wear a smile, remembering that special little dash really only lasts a while. Well, the truth is, we do need to live our lives, or live that dash, so we would be proud of what people would say to us after we're gone, or about us after we're gone. One day, we will all be just a memory, and we want that to be a good one. Well, Harold Edward Christian, born in 1928. That is such a long time ago, isn't it? Just think of all that's happened in this many years. It's kind of mind-boggling. He was born down at Hespeler in Western Ontario, known today more as Cambridge. From a farming family, 6 boys and 1 girl. I believe he said he was the youngest in the family. And it was probably these early years on the farm that he developed that strong work ethic that he carried throughout his life. There are a few things that you learn on a farm that you might not learn other places. I saw this now. I'm from a farming background, so this is why this is special to me. You learn patience. You learn patience the hard way because things are often so frustrating. Kids often learn to drive at a very young age. Not allowed in the road, but they drive tractors and they're all around the fields and the farm. You learn where your food comes from, and you do learn to respect the land. You learn a lot about the weather because the weather dictates every activity on a farm. You learn to appreciate your roots. You learn that there are no excuses. I don't know whether you grew up with the same kind of father as some of us did. Didn't matter if you wanted to stay open party at nighttime. You were in the barn 5:30 in the morning to milk cows. So you learn that very young. Boys learn to be handy. There's not much you cannot fix on a farm that you can't do with black wire and baler twine. You can fix many things. So you learn to be tough. The thing with farming, it is done in the heat of the summer. If you get a rainy day and you think, oh good, we're going to have some time, that'll be just the day your dad said there's a box stall out there that needs to be cleaned or some other nasty job that's just waiting for a rainy day. So those are the lessons that these kids learn working on a farm. I think sometimes if you're raised on a farm, you probably have dirt in your shoes and you maybe never really get rid of it. Anyway, he and his family, they learned some tough lessons very early on because their father left the family. Things weren't always easy with his stepdad. And you know that children so often carry their sadness or their fears within themselves. They just kind of accept life as it comes and they don't talk about it. He was one of those people that didn't talk a lot about his own personal things. He carried them close. Maybe we know a little bit more now the importance of talking and sharing and getting some of that out. But good or bad, that's how it was. It shapes us into the person we are. And we are all aware that not all memories are golden, we know that. But it's life. He was a hard worker from a young age. He didn't get to go to high school, leaving work quite young, leaving school to work rather, and as so many of the boys his age did, school wasn't a big thing, they were needed at home. Took work wherever he could find it. But then in 1950-51, just a young man, 21 years old, he decided to enlist in the armed forces and he was sent out to Saskatchewan. And that's where he met Jean, who became his wife. He didn't stay very long in the forces at that point, only 2 or 3 years, because there were a couple of things that came into play that changed his mind about the work he was doing. And he was this kind of gentle, quiet-speaking man who feels things fairly deeply. And he found it difficult to watch his comrades or some of his friends, fairly often every week, being killed in training exercises or things like that. And it just kind of turned him against what he was doing at that point. So he decided to leave and find something different. Back in Ontario, he found work down in Milton. He was working with the Arvillero, no less. And when that ended, then he rejoined the Air Force in 1956, 1957. But this time his experience was quite different. And he was part of the armed forces when Germany was opening up to NATO, so in the Cold War years, he was part of that. Several rotations overseas, enjoyed the traveling. He liked that part of the job, really liked the men he worked with. Harry Mills was one of his friends. He met him while he was stationed out in Moose Jaw. He said they lived in the same barracks. And that was back in 56 or 57. He said he was stretching his mind a bit to even recall, but he did remember a few things. But he said he was good enough friends with Harold that he was part of his and Jean's wedding party. So they did become good friends. But one thing, he said he never forgot this. Every time you would see Harold, he always had a toothpick in his mouth or behind his ear. Did he always do that? Oh my goodness, yeah. He said he was never without it. Even when he was playing baseball, he always had that toothpick dangling out of his mouth or behind his ear. The obvious downside of being posted away for periods of time, of course, is being away from your family for those long periods of time. Small children don't have long memories, and sometimes it's difficult to leave your wife and children to return. Small children aren't sure who you are. You're coming back into a home where mom has been looking after you and predominantly running the home, and then this man comes in, and it just changes the dynamics, and that makes that part of it quite difficult. Then in 1968, when he was going to transfer to Ottawa, he decided to retire for good and be closer to home. He wasn't long without a job, though, I hear. He started hauling trailers, which morphed into a job at the park, where he did that work in the park from 1969 right through to 2002. That's a second whole set of work to do. He was well known, though, apparently in the park, with friends, with most of them. I have a letter here that was written by Paul Sweetnam, and I'm going to read it just as he wrote it. So this is in his words. On behalf of my family, I and my family have known Harold Christian and his family for maybe 50 years. Their family worked and played with Andy, Elizabeth, Colleen, Marilyn, and myself at Sunny Creek Estates for many years. Harold started working part-time for Norm Hazelwood, who was the former owner of the Mobile Village, which is now SCE Limited, then for my father, Harry Sweetnam, and finally with me and my staff. Harold, as foreman, was responsible for all park maintenance, and he did his work so well that people did not have to go out and check on it. He was dependable, trustworthy, and faithful, continuing to work for SCE Limited for over 40 years, right up until his retirement. There were many different jobs that had to be done, and he never refused to take on anything that was asked of him. Some major jobs that we had to complete, and he lists some of the things: installing upgraded hydro to 120 lots, digging trenches for natural gas for 160 lots, water, septic and tanks, and roads. One very important project required the Ministry of the Environment building a wetland, a project that included Harold and other staff members and tenants, of course, working together. He and the other staff were all, and he said, invited in for coffee and cookies and sandwiches, and that would be even in the winter, he said, when we tracked snow. He said, I thought of Harold and his family as an extended part of our family. So Harold, enjoy your earned rest. And until we meet again, Paul. Well, I got thinking about that, and I thought, this is such a hard-working man, but just in case I make him seem like his entire life was built around work, that's not quite true. While I was in the armed forces, he played hockey, baseball, did some golf, although he said he wasn't so good at that maybe. He actually sustained a couple of injuries playing some of these sports. He managed to do some coaching of a softball team for a season, but Brian said even though he enjoyed the children and he enjoyed the game, what he didn't like was the part of the arguing parents that call, argue with every call you make. Yeah, come on. I know, I'm upset on that, we all know. As a dad, he was supportive of his children. Sandra, Heather, and Brian encouraging them in whatever they chose to do with their lives, but also parented with military strictness, which is a little bit more difficult the older you get. That's not quite so much fun. But he did believe in keeping them occupied, to keep them out of trouble at least, and at least out of serious trouble. He and Jean enjoyed going out together and doing things like going to movies. They danced together. Brian said they even won some trophies with their dancing. They didn't get to do a lot of traveling. Jean was from out west. I'm assuming they did make trips out west to visit family. So there was that. They did get a trip to Acapulco, Mexico. And they had lots of summer trips where they would go around southern Ontario, maybe Marineland and that kind of thing with their family in tow, and off they go. Well, as you would expect, he was also a member of the Air Force Association and the Royal Canadian Legion, being a member and participating in that as long as he was able to. Well, he and Jean had been married about 40 years when she passed away, and that, of course, makes it necessary for a person to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit. And Kathy came into his life, and they were fortunate enough to build life together for about 20 years. When you put all of this together and 100 other things that we didn't even think about or know about, you can see this man came from humble beginnings. He didn't have much formal education, but he built himself a good life. As a private person, carried and held his thoughts close, he spoke softly, he was dependable, he had friends. And to me, that is a life well lived. And he certainly has earned his rest. I would like to close this part of the service with these words written by a man called A. Powell Davies. He said, "Let us be honest about death. Let us not pretend that it is less than it is. It's a separation. It is sorrow and it is grief. But let us not pretend that death is more than it is. It is not annihilation, because as long as our memories endure, Harold has influence over you. As long as you can remember and think about the things you did, he still has some influence. It is definitely not an end to love. Humanity's need for love from each of us is absolutely boundless. It's not an end to joy and laughter. Nothing would less honor one who lived if we did that than to make our lives drab in some kind of counterfeit respect. That's not what we should be doing. But let's be honest with death, for in that honesty, we get to understand life a little bit better and ourselves more deeply. And you know, in the presence of death, we still continue to sing a song of life. We make our peace with death. We go from its presence. We are strengthened in the commitment to live out our own lives according to our highest values, things that are important to us. Did he live his dash well? I think he did. I think he did. It's not something that I can really answer, but just from what I heard, I think he lived it well. And it allows us to say, we make the world in which we live by what we gather or what we give, our daily deeds and the things we say, or about what we keep, what we throw away. We make our world by the beauty we see, whether it's in a skylark song or a lilac tree, in a hummingbird's wing, or in the moon, and the wonder that lingers up in those skies. We make our world by the life we lead, by the friends we have, or even what we read, by the sympathy we show in an hour of care, by loads we lift, or the love we share. We make our world by the goals we pursue and by the heights we seek in a higher view, by hopes and dreams that can reach the sun, and a will to fight until that is all won. What is the place in which we dwell? A hut or a palace? A heaven or a hell? We gather, we scatter, we take, we give, but we do make the world, and there we live. I would ask that you would stand for a blessing, and at the end of this, Emily will come back with some further instructions for you. If you would bow your head, please. May you go forward with a small flickering of light in your soul, and may the memories of Harold begin to bring comfort rather than sadness. May the words, the touch, and the presence of others bring you solace. And may you be blessed in your going out and your coming in, grateful for a life well lived and an enduring legacy that's been left behind. Amen. You may be seated. Emily will have something she wants to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we are going to be traveling over to the Belleville Cemetery. We're going to be exiting the chapel through the gray doors here behind us. Following the family, we ask that you make your way to your vehicles Make sure your four-way flashes are on and your high beams so that the community knows that you're in a funeral procession here today. For those who are not traveling to the cemetery, we just ask you to remain in your vehicles till everyone leaves, and then you're more than welcome to make your way home at that time. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. Starting with the family, if you can please rise and follow behind the family.
Well, we are, of course, here in memory of Harold, but we get to perform this one final duty for him. And in reverence and love, we will be placing his cremated remains here in the cemetery. But when we do that, we trust that whatever has been the best of his life will not be lost, but will remain with you always. And in this quiet moment, I'd like you to just pause for a minute and bring to mind one favorite memory. Seeing him doing something or something you did together. I'll give you a minute to do that. And hold on to that and let that bring you comfort. We're going to hear the piper again while you're thinking. We're going to hear the piper play Amazing Grace. With these words, Emily's going to have some further instruction, but I'm going to end with this. It says, may the truth that sets us free and the hope that never dies and the love that casts out fear, may that be with you now until dayspring breaks and shadows flee away. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may he lift up his countenance on you and give you peace.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you are able, you're more than welcome to rise while we listen to the last post. We'll have a moment of silence, and then we'll have the reveille. At the end of the service here today, if you'd like to come up and place your hand on Harold's casket urn one last time, and pay your last respects in any way you feel comfortable, you can do so at that time. So at this time, if you are able, please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, you're more than welcome to come forward. You can place your hand on Harold's urn, and you can make your way to your vehicles as soon as you're ready. Thank you.